Hello, everyone, and welcome back to AUDIOACUHO, where we connect housing professionals to discuss topics, current events, and trends that are relevant to you. I'm Jay Copeland,
And I'm Ryan Doherty.
and we'll be your OACU for the show. Today, we've got Tim Lade, Assistant Dean, a resident from the University of King's College, with us, and we'll be talking about staff training, how to be successful, what's changed in a global pandemic, and what lessons we learned from it. What is important to keep, and what new methods might persist in future years.
Tim has worked at a variety of different institutions and presented at conferences on a few different topics related to staff development and training. We're really excited to learn more from this conversation with Tim. So why don't we jump in? Tim, when you approached us, you wanted to discuss the training experience for professionals. Let's talk about that. What were your experiences with training this year?
Well, thank you for having me, friends.
Yeah,
I'm
you're
really
welcome.
excited
Pleasure.
to I'm really excited to be joining you from beautiful Halifax, Nova Scotia this morning, and I am excited to talk to you about training. And what's different about King's here is that we have residence dons, but not in the typical sense where they're undergrad students. We have uh, essentially grad students or full-time young professionals who join us as residence dons for the year, and they are not students at King's. And so their training is very different than what you would imagine for a second or a third year RA or Don at another institution. And so the whole training system is quite different here in how we approach developing and preparing our residence dons for the academic year. We do have junior dons as well, and those are undergrad students, but they are in a typical year. There are less of them, and there are more essentially full-time dons, and so it's quite a different model that I'm used to from
Already, I have
working in
so
the
many
past.
questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Tim, like, just that sounds like, as you said yourself, it's something different than what you're typically used to. And I'm assuming
Yeah.
this is like your first, I don't want to say year, but since moving and transitioning to King's, your first experience dealing with like a setup like this, knowing that you've participated in many sort of more traditional styles of, resident staff, where your staff would be students within their undergrad or whatever they're pursuing, depending on college, university. Uh, what are you finding are like the main differences that you're seeing?
Well, our dons come to the table with capacity, right? They've finished their undergrad degrees. The majority of them are in grad school, so they're pursuing masters, or we have two that are pursuing law degrees right now. One is actually in the seminary to become a priest, and so they have more life experience under their belt, and they don't require the training around pieces like self-care and resilience and the more soft skill pieces that we spend a lot of time and energy developing.
Mhm.
And it more is about uh, capacity building around policy, process, understanding, documentation standards. So it's a lot. It's a lot of time is spent on hard skills versus how are you going to uh, do a mediation between two people that aren't getting along.
Yeah.
And so because of that life experience and that previous degree having been done, it makes for a different experience because you also have to include that soft skill piece for the junior dons for the undergrad students, but at the same time you want to blend your training program so it's speaking to our grad student dons as well.
All right.
So, Tim, did you have multiple streams then? Is that the strategy that you went with?
So in a normal year here at King's, you would see a pretty standard training schedule of around 2 weeks, a retreat in the middle of that, a lot of time spent on socials, a lot of time spent on getting to know campus resources and that sort of stuff. So all total, there's 14 dons. There is six dons and 8 junior dons. Hopefully my math was correct there. And so we didn't have the opportunity. I would like to get to the point where we could have 2 different streams, but we sort of had to jam all of our critical training pieces into 5 days. And the reason for that is because we decided that self-isolation was going to be an important piece for residents reopening here, because we attract a high degree of students from Ontario, and so there was going to need to be that 2 weeks of self-isolation for those students on campus. And so we just didn't have the time to do that expanded training schedule. And the residence office consists of myself, 2 admin support, and the dean of students. And so we work with the tools that we have. And so our capacity gave us about a week of training time that we were able to carve out. So it was a significantly reduced and essential training pieces. We really focus on the idea of essentialism for this training period, and focused on the need to knows. And we've come up with a couple ideas for going forward into the future about picking up those topics that we weren't able to cover. But it really was focused on the essentialism of opening residence for the fall.
Yeah, I think here at Humber, like we did a similar thing. We made the call early on to we didn't actually take new staff for residents. We had originally set up the hiring for a ton of new staff. It was looking like a very exciting year, but when it came to looking at how our training was going to be cut down, because we similarly had like a 2-week training schedule that was very in depth and focused on building up those, very sort of preliminary soft skills and things that you need, we decided to go with a returners only model, so that we could reduce all of that, soft skill building and things out, and basically do refreshers on like process and procedure, knowing that these were staff members that had already worked with us and were familiar with, the sort of lighter side of things, and might just need like process refreshes or an update on how things have changed with a pandemic on the rise. And that allowed us to take our training from 2 weeks down to what was about 4 days in class kind of thing online, with 1 day of like sort of self work to complete forms and things that you could do sort of on your own. So that was an important piece for us to take forward. And I think like one of the things that we noticed when we were developing that training schedule is you have to pay attention to things like people's ability to stay present and attentive in an online environment.
Mm-hmm.
And, that meant shorter days that were broken up with like some self-study pieces at the end to make sure things were getting along. But you can't expect people to be present and attentive for an 8-hour day online on Teams or whatever, with their webcams off, not seeing other faces, and unable to like interact and having those small like social conversations that re-energize you. So that was a big deal for us. And I'm wondering if you experienced anything similar to that.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head, that there is such a thing as Zoom fatigue. And when I first started here in July, there was, I was in self-isolation for 2 weeks. And so all my interactions with my new colleagues and the staff I was interacting with was all via Zoom. And some days it was a full day of Zoom meetings. And by the end of it, your eyes hurt, your brain is clay, you don't really want to do anything other than stare at a wall. And there is such a thing as Zoom fatigue. And that was really reiterated to me during our dawn training, because we had 2 staff in self-isolation when training started. And so a student, a junior dawn from India, and a staff member from who had been in BC. And so they had to join us for the one junior dawn for almost the entirety of training was in self-isolation and Zooming in. And the other was just the first couple days, but still not only the technical side of making sure that they could hear us and they could understand what was going on, which more often than not did not work. And so I was constantly worrying about making sure they could hear and get connected. And then the other piece of, I've stared at a computer screen for 8 hours. I really don't want to do this anymore. And so the shortened days were important. The logistics of, okay, we're all going to go over to the dining hall together and eat lunch, physically distanced, of course. Now, how do we get food over to our two dons in self-isolation? And how do we make sure that the safety plans that the institution was looking for, so that we could meet together, what were all those I's dotted, were all those T's crossed? And so there was a lot of pre-work that I had never done before. I have never written a safety plan before, and now I have written 3 in 3 months. And so, and those required presidential approval here at the institution. So thinking about things like, how are we going to do behind closed doors, physically distanced? How are we going to practice assertiveness and documentation from afar? And the lesson that came out of that for me is that not only are those interactions so essential, but you have to think creatively about this if you're going to approach it online. And so one of the things that we identified is that one bulk of training is not going to be sufficient for our team for this year. So the idea that we've come up with is that we're going to do monthly sort of half day or full day training workshops where we can come together as a team in person, physically distanced, of course, and then we can work on those pieces that require interaction, like behind closed doors. And so training has not become a just an August thing. It's become a year-long, ongoing, fluid living process. And the nice thing about that is that it allows us to course correct over a policy we set in August and said, this is the policy for this year. When we have our training day come up in October, we can say, okay, documentation, not working. Let's course correct that. And so COVID has brought some benefits in allowing us to be a little more nimble with our processes, but it really has been an eye-opening experience around how do we build personal relationships through a computer screen. And that I don't really have an answer for that.
I've got a couple of ideas that I want, and I know, Ryan, I want to pose this question to you as well. But a couple of things that I was thinking of that I really want to comment on and make sure that we loop back to are the creative ways to do behind closed doors, because I do have an idea for that we sort of tested out here. But another thing is just when we're talking about that development of training, and I think we're seeing this in students in general, and being a student myself at this point as well, like the online delivery of training information or educational information in any form has to be interesting and engaging. Like, we did feedback on every session that we did. We had surveys in terms of like how you felt about it, because we really wanted to gather data on our first fully online training. And a lot of it was like, we want videos, we want like music, we want interactive pieces that we can engage with to keep us active and engaged and part of the presentation, versus just that lecture format style throwing information at you. Like, the online world is really calling for us to develop some sort of interactive and engaging training, which is fantastic because it also gives us the tools to like record that and present that later should we need to like onboard a staff mid-year or something like that. It's all done. We don't have to dedicate man and work hours into doing it. We can hand someone a package and be like, work through this training and then we'll revisit it later. And I think you're spot on with the ongoing training throughout the year piece. It's something we've developed as well. Ryan, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, totally. I think what we did at Ryerson is we essentially structured it so that, with some exceptions, it was self-directed learning in the morning. So we had a course shell set up on D2L, and it was all self-directed modules in the morning, and then the afternoon was live on Zoom, though. So I guess what I'm hearing from the group is that we sort of had a couple different strategies. Tim, it sounds like you were able to actually gather your team together in, say, physically distant ways. the only way that the only session that we were able to do that for was Safe Talk, and that was just because Living Works did not allow us to deliver Safe Talk in an online format. So we did have to do small 10-person max, including trainer and community support person, sessions of Safe Talk. So we did more sessions of Safe Talk, but we did have those in person. Everything else was online, either in self-directed or on Zoom, which was interesting. I think, Jay, one of the things that you highlighted is something that I'm really excited about, is the fact that we have everything built into our D2L course shell in terms of all of the self-directed learning. If we are onboarding anybody, so far we haven't had to, but I do expect that we may have one or two staff members who go home over the mid-year break. Our winter term has already been announced that it will be online. I expect that we might have one or two that say, you know what, I don't think I'm going to come back, and we might have to onboard some new folks. And we're in a much better spot to onboard someone midway through the year than we ever have been. So I'm excited about that. Not excited about losing a
I
staff
kind of want,
member, but excited about
yeah,
trying a new type of
But
training.
the hard work has been done already in building those courses, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that we took a similar approach here. Stuff like documentation and documentation processes, I built that through DAL Online, and so that has been helpful in exactly as you said, Ryan. So if we have some turnover from staff, that module now is built and ready to roll. And I think that the benefit of that is for years to come is going to be great.
and the thing is too, we can review those and pass them on to new staff if they're
Yeah,
transitioning, to show them what's exactly been trained before, and allow them to update those pieces as they see fit, or to follow up on the feedback that's been associated with that presentation. They can create a new one, and they can work on that piece by piece based on like a determined need, instead of reinventing the wheel every year. One thing that I do want to focus on, just being mindful of our time, is I know that we've got a bunch of creative minds here right now, and I really do want to ask the question: what what did we learn that we need to focus on? Like, what are the things that we think, based on how we revised staff training this year, we're maybe missing, that people uh, would put back in it if they could in some way, or want to put some energy to make sure that it is present in upcoming trainings regardless of the situation? And what kind of new things did we do that we're like, wow, this is fantastic, we should continue this on? And I know one sort of hot topic in like talking to previous staff members is, a lot of the time, some of the kind of fluffier team building stuff, like, I don't know if you do a camp or like an excursion of some kind as like a team building day or like an overnight, but that's something that I know that staff have reflected on, that they miss that piece because it's just like, that's where like the really casual, natural team building occurs, is like the in between session time where you get to meet your colleagues and kind of get a feel for who they are and how they work and who these people are going to spend the year with are.
yeah, I would agree with you, Jay, that the soul that of a team that is developed in the moments, the in between moments. I like that language.
Mm-hmm.
Is something that uh, has been identified as needing to be figured out, how we bring that piece back in, because you can sit there and listen on how to write an incident report, and you can do that through Zoom, but how are you going to build the connections and the necessary relationships amongst your Dawn or your RA team if you're not interacting socially?
Yeah.
And everything we do in residence is relationship based. If we were to pull out all of the most all of the elements of a Dawn or an RA's role, except the most important one, it would be relationship building at the end of the day. And so
Yeah.
how do we foster that? How do you create that culture if you're not interacting with each other? And that's one of the reasons I spent so much time and effort developing this in-person training safety plan, It had to go through occupational health and safety and had to have presidential approval because we really didn't have an answer of how do we create that heartbeat amongst our team members.
Yeah.
And so that is such an essential piece that I don't think we can do without.
No, and I think like that's one thing that always ends up on sort of the chopping block when it comes to like budget things is like taking out the fluffier kind of stuff as it's viewed, where it's not like essential training content. But we have to keep in mind that as professionals, we're lead by example people. We need to show and demonstrate how to build the community if we expect our staff to follow that. So an important piece of any training should be that interstaff community building, because if we can't create a small scale community within ourselves, what tools are we giving our staff to succeed in creating those larger scale communities to deliver the programming, to deliver, the experience that is proactive in preventing problems within our buildings, and then leads us away from the more like conduct based follow up stuff because we haven't given them the tools to create that positive experience we're looking for.
Yeah. I think, Jay, you really hit the nail on the head with that in terms of the professional team role modeling how to build community. I think one of the things that I've struggled with my team is this like community building piece one, but also them now as they think about programming, they're getting really stuck in this. It's COVID and I can't do anything. When I know throughout
Mm-hmm.
the summer, I guess when we were in the first wave for our Ontario folks, I was doing a lot of, I guess this is corny. I was doing programming with my friends, right? I was doing socials
Mm-hmm.
online with my friends and finding ways to build community. And one of the things that I regret is not scheduling more of that into our training, not only for the team building aspect, but also for the like, hey, this is how you do it with your community. These are a couple fun ideas of things that I know how to do, whether that's
Yeah.
hosting trivia nights on Zoom, playing Jackbox on Zoom. What can you do in sharing physical space while not being in close physical proximity? And there are a lot of
Yeah.
different options. I think our context of being in downtown Toronto, everything is heightened, concerns
Mm-hmm.
are heightened, and I think that
Yeah.
that's normal and appropriate. I would expect that of our team. Um, but I'm not wanting our folks to get stuck in this rut of I can't do anything because COVID is ruining what I previously understood programming community building to be. So that's one thing that I've been regretting, and I think should we have another staff training? Should August next year, August 2021 could feel similar to
Yeah.
August 2020.
Yeah.
And if it does, and I think that is a possibility, those are the things that I want to make sure we're adding.
Yeah,
And
I am aiming, uh, and if we don't need to end up doing it this way, that's fine. But I am aiming and assuming that next August is going to be the same as this previous August. And the thing that has been helpful to the team I work with, Ryan, is that we really distilled everything down to the essential aspects of what are our core pillars. Safety, so making sure students are wearing masks, that they're physically distancing, that people are washing their hands. We're doing rounds to make sure people are safe. But aside from that, the other two pillars are relationship building, spending time with students in the dining hall, running casual programming that doesn't need to be curriculum based this year. If we have pumpkin carving, which we're doing this Monday with the president, that is okay in a pandemic.
yeah.
And the third piece is that community piece, and making sure that we're not as often as possible, but that we are still having our floor meetings, that we are still having interactions, and whether that's online or in person, that we are really focusing on community, relationships, and safety, and everything else can go on the back burner for now, because we have to focus on what's essential and what we as professionals have the capacity for.
That's
Yes.
absolutely true, Tim. That's like, I think one of the things that, we often overlook is that, sometimes some of the things that we've done in the past, like moving towards pillars, sorry, where we're trying to hit certain targets, we have to reevaluate that every single year and say, is this still applicable to us? And what is our focus based on the needs of the community?
Mhm.
And I think it's very important for us to like have that in mind, that like things don't just need to stay the same because they have been that way for an amount of time. Like change is what moves us forward. I do want to just comment really quickly because I want to get kind of some feedback. But one of the not just feedback, but ideas from you. But one of the things that I was most excited about, because Tim had brought it up earlier in the conversation, was how do we do things like behind closed doors uh, at a distance? Because that's challenging. That's our skills based training where we're putting people in and we're offering them a learning experience with very little repercussions if something were to go wrong, and we can correct and adjust within that moment. I think it's been identified as a very valuable piece of training. So for myself, one of the things that we developed was I took a bunch of my skill in running, say, role playing games, and we basically created like our team social was working through I want to say a D&D like campaign, but it was very simplified, very easy for anyone to participate in. Like you didn't have to like create a character other than like a name and like something about you that was kind of unique, and like it was a very simple system for succeeding and failing, but it was based on working together with your team in this like imagination space to walk yourself through an experience that was run by a coordinator or a manager of that staff team, to put your staff in a situation that they might have to deal with in residence, and then to play through that as their characters and see the consequences of different actions and be able to collaborate with each other in order to overcome obstacles and things. And we found that they actually really enjoyed that as a bonding experience. It was kind of fun and educational, and it was also just it was a nice little like break from the tedium of having lecture content kind of thrown at you and the regular training day, which they ended up asking like, oh, can we do more of this, to the point where it's like, oh, we might actually have to develop an actual thing here beyond just improvisation. But it was a really cool experience to see that come to life because it wouldn't have had space in a previous year. It just wouldn't fit into the schedule.
Jay, can I ask you a question? Was your character in fact still a troll knight?
Tim knows too much about my personal life. No, I didn't have a character because I was the
Oh,
game
it's too
master,
bad.
if you
Yeah.
will.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but
That's
I did get to play a bunch of like building fires and other dangerous situations, and a janitor in need of help.
I I love that idea, and I would love to see any of the materials you built around that, because that was definitely a deficiency I identified for myself as a facilitator. Is
Mhm.
how do we keep behind closed doors, which is such an essential component
Yeah.
of any sort of training program, that experiential piece, how do we keep that fresh and new? And I would say that's priority number one for if we're going to replicate next fall what we're seeing this fall.
Mhm.
Then I think those pieces are the essential ones. So I'd love to see those materials.
You let me know. You reach out to me, and I'll be happy to share them with you. One of the most exciting parts of it was being able to give this to my coworkers who have no experience. Well, some have no experience, some have a lot of experience. There's a varying level of experience participating in things like this, and watching them succeed with their own individual teams and being able to
Yeah,
pick it up easily within the span of a day and just be able to walk through that. So that was a nicer thing. Yeah, I'll share.
I'm not
great.
surprised, Jay. This is hilarious, and
Yeah.
it's super creative, and I love that. Yeah, it's really cool, and I'd be curious to see, Jay. I feel like you're gonna have a lot of people hitting up your inbox.
Yeah.
Sliding into the DMs.
you, you know, there
Yeah,
was
that's a
we
dungeon master joke, get it?
we've been talking about the like, okay, we're expecting, or at least mentally planning for August 21 may feel very similar to August 2020. Um,
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I've been thinking about is that if we ever get to a post-pandemic world, what sort of things are we holding on to for training? Should we resume or return to some version of the world that we knew prior to COVID-19? And one of the things that I've been holding on to a lot is the fact that, like, historically I've struggled with the way in which we are in training and we essentially tell the staff that we monopolize their time for this 2 week, 10-day, 5-day training. And so, Tim, it was actually something I was thinking about in your context where you have young professionals who may have jobs and other commitments. I think about, just even in my context, we have a lot of students who need to work as much as they can in the summer to be able to
Yeah.
afford school. They may have other commitments. And I've always struggled in the way that training has just dominated their time. And we essentially
Yeah.
tell the team, at least I have at the institutions I've worked at, that during this training window, don't schedule anything because you won't be able to do
Yeah.
anything. And so with some of this self-directed stuff, we were actually able to be more flexible with our student staff. I know I had some folks who worked as research assistants in the summer and were doing other things, and they needed that time to wrap up the projects. And what was nice is we had the self-directed stuff. I said, I don't care when you do it, as long as it's done by noon the day that we're starting the afternoon stuff.
Yeah.
So for some of them, that means they were working in the lab in the morning, and then in the evening, they were, like, after training, they were going through the self-directed stuff. So I want to,
And
I think, in our hopefully post-pandemic world, I want to hold on to some of that, of giving them more
yeah.
flexibility so that they can manage the many other priorities that they have.
Yeah. I
Just being
think,
mindful of the time here. Tim, I'm going to let you finish this one up and answer Ryan's question. Then we'll end with some nice closing points. So throw in any
cool.
takeaways you feel like in this response.
I think, Ryan, you are so spot on there. And I've been a big believer of the flipped classroom model for a few years, where you give them the self-directed piece in advance, do that on your own time in your own way, and then when we spend time together, let's spend that on the essentialness of whatever that skill building is. And that's something I really want to hold on to. And I agree with you. Like, you and I did training together at MacEwan all those years ago, Ryan. And so I remember that Tim who was like, you may not go and get a haircut, you may not see your family, you must be mine for 3 weeks. And, like, who was that guy? Like, that makes no sense. And that is not healthy. That is not supportive of anyone's well-being, my own well-being, including me. And I think the great benefit from this flipped classroom model is that there will be great advancements in how we approach time requirements and health and wellness of the staff that we're working with. And I am super excited about the idea of what the next few years are going to look like in terms of time commitment and how we encourage learning in our training plans.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tim. Okay, I think that's pretty much us for the day. I've loved the conversation that we've had here. As a final piece that I want to throw into all of you housing professionals that might be in charge of a training program, don't get rid of things like camp. It may be easy to cut it out of your budget and save a couple pennies, but it's a very critical development process that you shouldn't ignore and think is not valuable. So I want to throw that in. I want to thank Tim for joining us today, and of course, Ryan, as always, for being an excellent co-host. And I'll turn it over to you, Ryan, for the wrap-up.
Yeah, we do really appreciate Tim joining us, and it was an interesting conversation. If folks want to continue the conversation on this topic, feel free to contact Tim at tim.lade@ukings.ca, or get a hold of myself at ryan.doherty@ryerson.ca, or Jay, who can be reached at audioacuho@gmail.com. The O in audio is shared with the O in Oakuo. So it's audioacuho@gmail.com. If you're interested in participating in the podcast, we would love to hear from you.
Absolutely. And thank you again for joining us. That's it for today, and we'll see you next time on Audio Akuo.